How's it going, folks? Mason Goodnight here, back again with another episode of Spurgeon Read My Way, the main show. This should be show 11, I believe, of the main show. I'm blessed to be able to be back here reading once again. I love getting through Spurgeon's pithy and powerful, deep quotes, too. He's got the short, punchy, pithy ones. He's got deep, powerful stuff. He's the Prince of Preachers for a reason, and his lectures to his students are a cool insight into a guy being a little more off the cuff, a little more just less prompted. These are how they were. Those lectures were him with the students after main teaching stuff and doing this more just him talking. Very, very much a, what do you say? I can't believe I just forgot the term. He uses it all the time. Impromptu is a term. It's not the term, but it's, wow, I can't believe I forgot it. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's just a term. But he just kind of off the cuff would talk with these guys and give him his thoughts and his ideas, and it comes over much that way. It's much more free, much less structured than something that would be a specific, detailed teaching on things. And again, like I've said, I don't always agree with everything Spurgeon says, but overall, I love what he has to say. Overall, I think what he has to say is powerful, impactful, and beneficial for anybody that names the name of Jesus Christ as their Lord. And so I'm blessed to be able to read it, to go over it with you, and pray that it blesses you like it blesses me. And maybe you'll share these with someone else, and maybe you'll subscribe on Patreon and get into the bonus shows where you get the morning and evening readings, as well as the readings from the quotations book. I don't know if this is your first time hearing the show. You just popped in because you wanted to hear this lecture, which is lecture 8 on the voice. If that's why you popped in today, or whether you've been following along, those who do subscribe on Patreon for $5 a month, they're getting the bonus shows. Not only do you get the main show that comes here on YouTube, and that comes however YouTube puts it on. I don't know how many commercials or breaks they may put in it. But if you get it on Patreon, it goes through the Patreon app, and I believe it clears out any commercials going through that. So all the bonus shows and the main shows go through there without any commercial interruption, I believe. That's how it's working through that. And also, you're getting the bonus shows. They come out weekly. Now, sometimes I've missed some weeks. Summer's been crazy. But the main goal is not just on second and fourth Fridays getting this main show, but Patreon subscribers getting a reading from morning and evening, the quotations reading, and it's more of a personalized time. It's just me. I talk with folks about different things of the show, different things of ministry and life, and just a little more personal interaction about what I'm up to. My church here, I'm part of a little church here in Roseburg called Reformed Baptist Church, and talk a little bit more about details on that for those who are subscribing there, a little more details on ministry outside of, and encourage people to pray for the ministry that I'm taking part in the church, and just overall life a little more in depth. And so if that's something you'd like and want to get involved with, sign up. It's only $5 a month, and you get a lot more content through Patreon. Of course, if you sign up now, you'll get kind of a glut of content. There's a bunch of episodes in there that you'll be able to just pull up and go through in depth now. So kind of the folks who come in later actually get more content right off the bat. If you've been watching for a while and watching on YouTube, you've only gotten these 10 shows. I believe it is 10, or maybe this is the 11th show. I'm not sure. It's 11th show, I believe. But if you go there to Patreon now, you sign up, you get tons of extra content. Plus, you do get signed in officially just by being in there, being one of the Patreon subscribers. Like I've said before several times, I bought this brand new deluxe hardback edition of Spurgeon's lectures to my students, and I've been reading digitally here for you. But one day, if, and it's a big if now, one day if we ever hit 100 subscribers, then somebody's going to get that. I'm going to give that away to somebody. But even if it doesn't happen, so what? Maybe it'll be cool in my library. I'll give it to somebody else sometime. But I plan to keep plowing through these lectures, no matter how many people join in with their Patreon or just watching along. And I pray that the reading of them would be a blessing to everybody who hears them, and they would want to share them so that more people that maybe don't want to buy the book or read it digitally and like the audiobook style. And again, like I've said many times, I am not a professional audiobook reader. I don't edit these things. I don't stop and pause and clear out places where I drink water. And I don't, if I mess up a word or don't say one right, sometimes, I'm not going back and fixing it. I'm just plowing through, and I pray that it's a blessing and it's good enough for you. But if this is a blessing in that way, praise God, and I hope it is. So that's what I'll be doing again today. Without too much further ado, as I say, and reading from Lecture 8. Let's just get into it. Lecture 8 from Spurgeon's Lectures to my students. Lecture 8 on the voice. Our first rule with regard to the voice would be, do not think too much about it. For recollect, the sweetest voice is nothing without something to say, and however well it may be managed, it will be like a well-driven cart with nothing in it, unless you convey by it important and seasonable truths to your people. Demosthenes was doubtless right in giving a first, second, and third place to a good delivery, but of what value will that be if a man has nothing to deliver? A man with a surpassingly excellent voice who is destitute of well-informed head and an earnest heart will be a voice crying in the wilderness, or to use Plutarch's expression, vox et praeterea nihil. Such a man may shine in the choir, but he is useless in the pulpit. Whitfield's voice, without his heart power, would have left no more lasting effects upon his hearers than Pagani's fiddle. You are not singers, but preachers. Your voice is but a secondary matter. Do not be fops with it, or pulling invalids over it, as so many are. A trumpet need not be made of silver, a ram's horn will suffice. But it must be able to endure rough usage, for trumpets are for war's conflicts, not for the drawing rooms of fashion. On the other hand, do not think too little of your voice, for its excellence may greatly conduce to the result which you hope to produce. Plato, in confessing the power of eloquence, mentions the tone of the speaker. So strongly, says he, does the speech and the tone of the orator ring in my ears that scarcely in the third or fourth day do I recollect myself and perceive where on earth I am. And for a while I am willing to believe myself living in the Isles of the Blessed. Exceedingly precious truths may be greatly marred by being delivered in monotonous tones. I once heard a most esteemed minister who mumbled sadly, compared to a humble bee in a pitcher, a vulgar metaphor, no doubt, but so exactly descriptive that it brings to my mind the droning sound at this instant and most distinctly, and reminds me of the parody upon Gray's elegy. Now fades the glimmering subject from the sight, and all the air a sleepy stillness holds, save where the parson's hums his droning flight, and drowsy tinklings lull the slumbering folds. What a pity that a man who from his heart delivered doctrines of undoubted value in language the most appropriate should commit ministerial suicide by harping on one string. And when the Lord had given him an instrument of many strings to play upon, alas, alas, for that dreary voice, it hummed and hummed like a mill wheel to the same unmusical tune. Whether its owner spake of heaven or hell, eternal life or everlasting wrath, it might be by accident a little louder or softer, according to the length of the sentence, but its tone was still the same, a dreary waste of sound, a howling wilderness of speech in which there was no possible relief, no variety, no music, nothing but horrible sameness. When the wind blows through the alien harp, it swells all the chords, but the heavenly wind passing through some men spends itself upon one string, and that for the most part the most of the tune of the whole. Grace alone could enable hearers to edify under the drum, drum, drum of some divines. I think an impartial jury would bring in a verdict of justifiable slumbering in many cases where the sound emanating from the preacher lulls to sleep by its reiterated tone. Dr. Guthrie charitably traces the slumbers of a certain Scotch congregation to bad ventilation in the meeting house. This has something to do with it, but a bad condition of the valves of the preacher's throat might be a still more potent cause. Brethren, in the name of everything that is sacred, ring the whole chime in your steeple, and do not dun your people with the ding-dong of one poor cracked bell. When you do pay attention to the voice, take care not to fall into the habitual and common affectation of the present day. Scarcely one man in a dozen in the pulpit talks like a man. This affectation is not confined to Protestants, for the Abbé Malloy remarks, everywhere else men speak, they speak at the bar and the tribune, but they no longer speak in the pulpit. for there we only meet with facetious and artificial language and a false tone. This style of speaking is only tolerated in the church because, unfortunately, it is so general there. Elsewhere it would not be endured. What would be thought of a man who should converse in a similar way in a drawing room? How he would certainly provoke many a smile. Some time ago there was a warder at the Pantheon, a good sort of fellow in his way, who, in enumerating the beauties of the monument, adopted precisely the tone of many of our preachers, and never failed thereby to excite the hilarity of the visitors, who were as much amused with his style of address as with the objects of interest which he pointed out to them. A man who has not a natural and true delivery should not be allowed to occupy the pulpit. From thence, at least, everything that is false should be summarily banished. In these days of mistrust, everything that is false should be set aside, and the best way of correcting oneself in that respect, as regards preaching, is frequently to listen to certain monotonous and vehement preachers. We should come away in such disgust and with such a horror of their delivery that we should prefer condemning ourselves to silence rather than imitate them. The instant you abandon the natural and true, you forego the right to be believed, as well as the right of being listened to. You may go all round to church and chapel alike, and you will find that by far the larger majority of our preachers have a holy tone for Sundays. They have one voice for the parlor and the bedroom, and quite another tone for the pulpit, so that, if not double-tongued sinfully, they certainly are so literally. The moment some men shut the pulpit door, they leave their own personal manhood behind them, and become as official as the parish beadle. There are, they might also boast with the Pharisee, that they are not as other men are, although it would be blasphemy to thank God for it. No longer are they carnal and speak as men, but a whine, a broken hum-ha, an ora rotundo, or some other graceless mode of noise-making is adopted, to prevent all suspicion of being natural and speaking out of the abundance of the heart. When that gown is once on, how often does it prove to be a shroud of man's true self, the effeminate emblem of officialism? There are 2 or 3 modes of speech which I dare say you will recognize as having frequently heard. That dignified, doctorial, inflated, bombastic style, which I just now called the ora rotundo, is not quite so common now as it used to be, but it is still admired by some. Unfortunately, the lecturer could not here be reported by any known form of letterpress, as he proceeded to read a hymn with a round, rolling, swelling voice. When a reverend gentleman was once blowing off steam in this way, a man in the aisle said he thought the preacher had swallowed a dumpling. But another whispered, "No, Jack, he ain't swallered un. He's got un in his mouth, a-wobblin'." I can imagine Dr. Johnson talking in that fashion at Bolt Court, and from men to whom it is natural it rolls with Olympian grandeur. But in the pulpit, away forever with all imitation of it. If it comes naturally, well and good, but to mimic it is treason, to commit decency. Indeed, all mimicry is in the pulpit near akin to the unpardonable sin. There is another style at which I beseech you not to laugh, giving another illustration, a method of enunciation said to be very ladylike, mincing, delicate, girlified, dawdling, dundryish. I know not how else to describe it. We have most of us had the felicity of hearing these or some others of the extensive genus of falsettos, high stilts, and affectations. I have heard many different varieties, from the fullness of the Johnsonian to the thinness of the little genteel whisper, from the roaring of the bulls of Bashan up to the chip, chip, chip of the chaffinch. I have been able to trace some of our brethren to their forefathers, I mean their ministerial forefathers, from whom they first of all gathered these heavenly, melodious, sanctified, in every way beautiful, but I must honestly add, detestable modes of speech. The undoubted order of their oratorical pedigree is as follows: Chip, which was the son of Lisp, which was the son of Simper, which was the son of Dandy, which was the son of affectation, or Wobbler, which was the son of Grandiose, which was the son of Pomposity. The same was the father of many sons. Understand that where even these horrors of sound are natural, I do not condemn them. Let every creature speak in its own tongue, but the fact is that in 9 cases out of 10, these sacred brogues, which I hope will soon be dead languages, are unnatural and strained. I am persuaded that these tones and semitones and monotones are Babylonian. They are not at all the Jerusalem dialect, for the Jerusalem dialect has this one distinguishing mark, that it is a man's own mode of speech, and it is the same out of the pulpit as it is in it. Our friend of the affected or rotundo school was never known to talk out of the pulpit as he does in, or say in the parlor in the same tone which he uses in the pulpit. Will you be so good as to give me another cup of tea? I take sugar, if you please. He would make himself ludicrous if he did so, but the pulpit is to be favored with the scum of his voice, which the parlor would not tolerate. I maintain that the best notes a man's voice is capable of should be given to the proclamation of the gospel, and these are such as nature teaches him to use in earnest conversation. Ezekiel served his master with his most musical and melodious powers, so that the Lord said, Thou art unto them as a very lovely song of one that hath a pleasant voice, and can play well on an instrument. Although this, alas, was of no use to Israel's hard heart, as nothing will be but the Spirit of God. Yet it will become the prophet to deliver the word of the Lord in the best style of voice and manner. In the next place, if you have any idiosyncrasies of speech, which are disagreeable to the ear, correct them, if possible. It is admitted that this is much more easy for the teacher to inculcate than any for you to practice. Yet to young men in the morning of their ministry, the difficulty is not insuperable. Brethren from the country have a favor of their rustic diet in their mouths, reminding us irresistibly of the calves of Essex, the swine of Berkshire, or the runts of Suffolk. Who can mistake the Yorkshire or Somersetshire dialects, which are not merely provincial pronunciations, but tones also? It would be difficult to discover the cause, but the fact is clear enough, that in some counties of England men's threats seem to be furred up, like long-used tea-kettles, and in others they ring like brass music, with a vicious metallic sound. Beautiful these variations of nature may be in their season and place, but my taste has never been able to appreciate them. A sharp, discordant squeak, like a rusty pair of scissors, is to be got rid of at all hazards. So also is a thick, inarticulate utterance in which no word is complete, but nouns, adjectives, and verbs are made into a kind of hash. Equally objectionable is that ghostly speech in which a man talks without using his lips, ventriloquizing most horribly. Sepulchral tones may fit a man to be an undertaker, but Lazarus is not called out of his grave by hollow moans. One of the surest ways to kill yourself is to speak from the throat instead of the mouth. This misuse of nature will be terribly avenged by her. Escape the penalty by avoiding the offense. It may be well in this place to urge you, as soon as you detect yourself interposing hum-haw pretty plentifully in your discourse, to purge yourself of the insinuating but ruinous habit at once. There is no need whatever for it. And although those who are now its victims may never be able to break the chain, you, who are beginners in oratory, must scorn to wear the galling yoke. It is even needful to say, open your mouths when you speak, for much of inarticulate mumbling is the result of keeping the mouth half closed. It is not in vain that the evangelists have written of our Lord, He opened His mouth and taught them. Open wide the doors from which such godly truth is to march forth. Moreover, brethren, avoid the use of the nose as an organ of speech, for the best authorities are agreed that it is intended to smell with. Time was when the nasal twang was the correct thing, but in this degenerate age you had better obey the evident suggestion of nature, and let the mouth keep to its work without interference of the olfactory instrument. Should an American student be present, he must excuse my pressing this remark upon his attention. Abhor the practice of some men who will not bring out the letter R. Such a habit is very ruinous and ridiculous, very wretched and reprehensible. Now and then a brother has the felicity to possess a most winning and delicate lisp. This is perhaps among the least of evils, where the brother himself is a little in winning. But it would ruin any being aimed at manliness and force. I can scarcely conceive of Elijah lisping to Ahab, or Paul prettily chipping his words on Mars Hill. There may be a peculiar pathos about a weak and watery eye and a faltering style. We will go further and admit that when these are the result of intense passion, they are sublime. But some possess them by birth and use them rather too freely. It is, to say the least, unnecessary for you to imitate them. Speak as educated nature suggests to you, and you will do well. But let it be educated and not raw, rude, uncultivated nature. Demosthenes took, as you know, unbounded pains with his voice, and Cicero, who was naturally weak, made a long journey into Greece to correct this manner of speaking. With far nobler themes, let us not be less ambitious to excel. Deprive me of everything else, says Gregory of Nazianzen, but leave me eloquence, and I shall never regret the voyages by which I have made in order to study it. Always speak so as to be heard. I know a man who weighs 16 stone and ought to be able to be heard half a mile, who is so graciously indolent that in his small place of worship you can scarcely hear him in the front of the gallery. What is the use of a preacher whom men cannot hear? Modesty should lead a voiceless man to give place to others who are more fitted for the work of proclaiming the messages of the king. Some men are loud enough, but they are not distinct. Their words overlap each other, play at leapfrog, or trip each other up. Distinct utterance is far more important than wind power. Do give a word a fair chance. Do not break its back in your vehemence, or run it off its legs in your haste. It is hateful to hear a big fellow mutter and whimper when his lungs are quite strong enough for the loudest speech. But at the same time, let a man shout ever so lustily, he will not be well heard unless he learns to push his words forward with due space between. To speak too slowly is miserable work, and subjects active-minded hearers to the disease called the horrors. It is impossible to hear a man who crawls along at a mile an hour. One word today and one tomorrow is a kind of slow fire which martyrs only could enjoy. Excessively rapid speaking, tearing and raving into utter rant, is quite as inexcusable. It is not and never can be powerful, except with idiots, for it turns what should be an army of words into a mob, and most effectually drowns the sense in floods of sound. Occasionally one hears an infuriated orator of indistinct utterance, whose impetuosity hurries him on to such confusion of sounds that at a little distance one is reminded of Lucan's lines. Her gabbling tongue a muttering tone confounds, discordant and unlike to human sounds. It seemed of dogs the bark, of wolves the howl, the doleful screeching of the midnight owl, the hiss of snakes, the hungry lion's roar, the bound of billows beating on the shore, the groan of winds among the leafy wood, and burst of thunder from the rending cloud. 'Twas these, all these in one. It is an infliction not to be endured twice, to hear a brother who mistakes perspiration for inspiration. Tear along like a wild horse with a hornet in its ear till he has no more wind and must needs pause to pump his lungs full. Again, a repetition of this indecency several times in a sermon is not uncommon, but is most painful. Pause soon enough to prevent the huff, huff, which rather creates pity for the breathless orator than sympathy with the subject in hand. Your audience ought not to know that you breathe at all. The process of respiration should be as unobserved as the circulation of the blood. It is indecent to let the mere animal function of breathing cause any hiatus in your discourse. Do not, as a rule, exert your voice to the utmost in ordinary preaching. 2 or 3 earnest men now present are tearing themselves to pieces by needless bawling. Their poor lungs are irritated, and their larynx inflamed by boisterous shouting, from which they seem unable to refrain. Now it is all very well to cry aloud and spare not, but do thyself no harm, is apostolical advice. When persons can hear you with half the amount of voice, it is as well to save the superfluous force for times when it may be wanted. Waste not, want not, may apply here as well as elsewhere. Be a little economical with the enormous volume of sound. Do not give your hearers headaches when you mean to give them heartaches. You aim to keep them from sleeping in their pews, but remember that it is not needful to burst the drums of their ears. The Lord is not in the wind. Thunder is not lightning. Men do not hear in the proportion of the noise created. In fact, too much noise stuns the ear, creates reverberations and echoes, and effectually injures the power of your sermons. Adapt your voice to your audience. When 20,000 are before you, draw out the stops and give the full peal, but not in a room which will only hold a score or two. Whenever I enter a place to preach, I unconsciously calculate how much sound is needed to fill it, and after a few sentences, my key is pitched. If you can make the man at the end of the chapel hear, if you can see that he is catching your thought, you may be sure that those nearer can hear you, and no more force is needed. Perhaps a little less will do. Watch and see. Why speak so as to be heard in the street when there is nobody there who is listening to you? Where the indoors are out, see that the most remote hearers can follow you, and that will be sufficient. By the way, I may observe that brethren should, out of mercy to the weak, always attend carefully to the force of their voices in sick rooms, and in congregations where some are known to be very infirm. It is a cruel thing to sit down by a sick man's bedside and shout out, "The Lord is my shepherd." If you act so thoughtlessly, the poor man will say as soon as you are downstairs, "Dear me, how my head aches. I am glad the good man is gone. Mary, that is a very precious psalm, and so quiet-like, but he read it out like thunder and lightning, and almost stunned me." Recollect, you younger and unmarried men, that softer whispers will suit the invalid better than the roll of drum and culverin. Observe carefully the rule to vary the force of your voice. The old rule was to begin very softly, gradually rise higher, and bring out your loudest notes at the end. Let all such regulations be blown to pieces at the cannon's mouth. They are impertinent and misleading. Speak softly or loudly as the emotion of the moment may suggest, and observe no artificial and fanciful rules. Artificial rules are an utter abomination. As M. de Cormerin satirically puts it, be impassioned, thunder, rage, weep, up to the 5th word of the 3rd sentence of the 10th paragraph of the 10th leaf. How easy that would be, above all, how very natural. In imitation of a popular preacher, to whom it was unavoidable, a certain minister was accustomed, in the commencement of his sermon, to speak in so low a key that no one could possibly hear him. Everybody leaned forward, fearing that something good was being lost in the air, but their straining was in vain. A holy mutter was all they could discern. If the brother could not have spoken out, none should have blamed him. But it was a most absurd thing to do this when in a short time he proved the power of his lungs by filling the whole structure by sonorous sentences. If the first half of his discourse was of no importance, why not omit it? And if of any value at all, why not deliver it distinctly? Effect, gentlemen, that was the point aimed at. He knew that one who spoke in the fashion had produced great effects, and he hoped to rival him. If any of you dare commit such a folly as such a detestable object, I heartily wish you had never entered this institution. I tell you most seriously that the thing called effect is hateful, because it is untrue, artificial, tricky, and therefore despicable. Never do anything for effect, but scorn the stratagems of little minds, hunting after the approval of connoisseurs in preaching, who are a race as obnoxious as a true minister as locusts to the eastern husbandman. But I digress. Be clear and distinct at the very first. Your exordia are too good to be whispered to space. Speak them out boldly, and command attention at the very onset by your manly tones. Do not start at the highest pitch as a rule, for then you will not be able to rise when you warm with the work, but still be outspoken from the first. Lower the voice when suitable, even to a whisper, for soft, deliberate, solemn utterances are not only a relief to the ear, but have a great aptitude to reach the heart. Do not be afraid of the low keys, for if you throw force into them, they are as well heard as the shouts. You need not speak in a loud voice in order to be heard well. Macaulay says of William Pitt, his voice, even when it sank to a whisper, was heard to the remotest benches of the House of Commons. It has been well said that the most noisy gun is not one which carries a ball the furthest. The crack of a rifle is anything but noisy. It is not the loudness of your voice, it is the force which you put into it that is effective. I am certain that I could whisper so as to be heard throughout every corner of our great tabernacle, and I am equally certain that I could halloa a shout so that no one could understand me. The thing could be done here, but perhaps the example is needless, as I fear some of you perform the business with remarkable success. Waves of air may dash upon the ear in such rapid succession that they create no translatable impression on the auditory nerve. Ink is necessary to write with, but if you upset the ink bottle over the sheet of paper, you convey no meaning thereby. So it is with sound. Sound is the ink, but management is needed, not quantity, to produce an intelligible writing upon the ear. If your sole ambition be to compete with Stentor the strong, endued with brazen lungs, whose throats surpass the force of 50 tongues, then bawl yourselves into Elysium as rapidly as possible. But if you will to be understood, and so to be of service, shun the reproach of being impotent and loud. You are aware that shrill sounds travel the furthest. The singular cry which is used by travelers in the wilds of Australia owes its remarkable power to its shrillness. A bell which will be heard much farther off than a drum, and very singularly, the more musical a sound is, the farther it travels. It is not the thumping of the piano which is needed, but the judicious sounding of the best keys. You will therefore feel at liberty to ease the strain very frequently in the direction of loudness, and you will be greatly relieving both the ears of the audience and your own lungs. Try all methods, from the sledgehammer to the puffball. Be as gentle as a zephyr and as furious as a tornado. Be indeed just what every common-sense person in his speech, when he talks naturally, pleads vehemently, whispers confidentially, appeals plaintively, or publishes distinctly. Next to the moderation of lung force, I should place the rule, modulate your tones. Alter the key frequently and vary the string constantly. Let the bass, the treble, and the tenor take their turn. I beseech you to do this out of pity to yourself and to those who hear you. God has mercy upon us, and arranges all things to meet our cravings. For variety, let us have mercy upon our fellow creatures, and not persecute them with the tedium of sameness. It is a most barbarous thing to inflict upon the tympanum of a poor fellow creature's ear the anguish of being bored and gimbleted with the same sound for half an hour. What swifter mode of rendering the mind idiotic or lunatic could be conceived than the perpetual droning of a beetle or buzzing of a blue bottle in the organ of hearing? What dispensation have you by which you are to be tolerated such cruelty to the helpless victims who sit under your drum ministrations? Kind nature frequently spares the drone's unhappy victims the full effect of his tortures by steeping them in sweet repose. This, however, you do not desire. Then speak with varied voice. How few ministers remember that monotony causes sleep. I fear the charge brought by a writer in the Imperial Review is true to the letter of numbers of my brethren. We all know how the noise of running water, or the murmur of the sea, or the sighing of the south wind among the pines, or the moaning of wood doves induces a deliciously dreamy languor. Far be it from us to say that the voice of a modern divine resembles in the slightest degree any of these sweet sounds. Yet the effect is the same, and few can resist the drowsy influences of a lengthy dissertation, delivered without the slightest variation of tone or alteration of expression. Indeed, the very exceptional use of the phrase an awakening discourse, even by those most familiar with such matters, conveys the implication that the great majority of pulpit harangues are of decidedly soporific tendency. It is an ill case when the preacher leaves his hearers perplexed, twixt the two to determine. Watch and pray, says the text. Go to sleep, says the sermon. However musical your voice may be in itself, if you continue to sound the same chord perpetually, your hearers will perceive that its notes are by distance made more sweet. Do in the name of humanity cease intoning and take to rational speaking. Should this argument fail to move you, I am so earnest about this point that if you will not follow my advice out of mercy to your hearers, yet do it out of mercy to yourselves. For as God in his infinite wisdom has been pleased always to append a penalty to every sin against his natural as well as moral laws, so the evil of monotony is frequently avenged by that dangerous disease called dysphonia clericorum, or clergyman's sore throat. When certain of our brethren are so beloved by their hearers, they do not object to pay a handsome sum to get rid of them for a few months. When a journey to Jerusalem is recommended and provided for, bronchitis of a modified order is so remarkably overruled for good that my present argument will not disturb their equanimity. For such is not our lot. To us, bronchitis means real misery, and therefore, to avoid it, we would follow any sensible suggestion. If you wish to ruin your throats, you can speedily do so, but if you wish to preserve them, note what is now laid before you. I have often in this room compared the voice to a drum. If the drummer should always strike in one place on the head of his drum, the skin would soon wear into a hole. But how much longer it would have lasted him if he had varied his thumping and had used the entire surface of the drum head. So it is with a man's voice. If he uses always the same tone, he will wear a hole in that part of the throat which is most exercised in producing that monotony, and very soon he will suffer from bronchitis. I have heard surgeons affirm that dissenting bronchitis differs from the Church of England article. There is an ecclesiastical twang which is much admired in the establishment, a sort of steeple in the throat grandeur, an aristocratic, theologic, parsonic, supernatural, infrahuman mouthing of language and rolling over of words. It may be illustrated by the following specimen. He that hath yaws to yaw, let him yaw, which is a remarkable, if not impressive, rendering of a scripture text. Who does not know the hallowed way of pronouncing, Dearly beloved brethren, the scripture moveth us in diverse places. It rolls in my ears now like Big Ben, coupled with boyish memories of a monotonous peals of the Prince Albert, Albert Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Amen. Now, if a man who talks so unnaturally does not get bronchitis or some other disease, I can only say that throat diseases must be very sovereignly dispensed. At the nonconformist hobbies of utterance I have already struck a blow, and I believe it is by them that larynx and lungs become delicate, and good men succumb to silence and the grave. Should you desire my authority for the threat which I have held out to you, I shall give you the opinion of Mr. Macready, the eminent tragedian, who, since he looks at the matter from an impartial but experimental standpoint, is worthy of respectful hearing. Relaxed throat is usually caused not so much by exercising the organ as by the kind of exercise. That is, not so much by long or loud speaking as by the speaking in a feigned voice. I am not sure that I shall be understood in this statement, but there is not one penalty to every sin against his natural as well. It is not. I am not sure that I shall understand in this statement. I shall be understood in this statement, but there is not one person, and I may say 10,000, who in addressing a body of people does so in his natural voice. And this habit is more especially observable in the pulpit. I believe that relaxation of the throat results from violent efforts in those affected tones, and the severe irritation and often ulceration is the consequence. The labor of a whole day's duty in a church is nothing, in point of labor compared with the performance of one of Shakespeare's leading characters, nor, I should suppose, with any of the very great displays made by our leading statesmen in the House of Parliament. And I feel very certain that the disorder which you designate as clergyman's sore throat is attributable generally to the mode of speaking, and not to the length of time of the violence or violence of effort that may be employed. I have known several of my former contemporaries on the stage suffer from sore throat, but I do not think among those eminent in their art that it could be regarded as a prevalent disease. Actors and barristers have much occasion to strain their vocal powers, and yet there is no such thing as a counsel's sore throat, or a tragedian's bronchitis, simply because these men dare not serve the public in so slovenly a manner as some preachers serve their God. Samuel Fenwick, Esquire, M.D., in a popular treatise upon the disease of the throat and lungs, has most wisely said, "From what was stated respecting the physiology of the vocal cords, it will be evident that continued speaking in one tone is much more fatiguing than frequent alterations in the pitch of the voice, because by the former one muscle or set of muscles alone is strained, whilst by the latter different muscles are being brought into action and thus relieve one another. In the same way, a man raising his arm at right angles to his body becomes fatigued in 5 or 10 minutes, because only one set of muscles has to bear the weight. But these same muscles can work the whole day if their action is alternated with that of others. Whatever, therefore, we hear a clergyman droning through the church service, and in the same manner and tone of voice reading, praying, and exhorting, we may be perfectly sure that he is giving 10 times more labor to his vocal cords than is absolutely necessary. This may be the place to reiterate an opinion which I have often expressed in this place, of which I am reminded by the author whom I have quoted. If ministers would speak oftener, their throats and lungs would be less liable to disease. Of this I am quite sure. It is matter of personal experience and wide observation, and I am confident that I am not mistaken. Gentlemen, twice a week preaching is very dangerous, but I have found 5 or 6 times healthy, and even 12 or 14 not excessive. A costermonger set to cry cauliflowers and potatoes one day in a week would find the effort most laborious. But when he is, for 6 successive days, filling the streets and lanes and alleys with his sonorous din, he finds no dysphonia pulmonarium or costermonger sore throat. Laying him aside from his humble toils, I was pleased to find my opinion that infrequent preaching is the root of many diseases, thus plainly declared by Dr. Fenwick. All the directions which have been here laid down will, I believe, ineffectual without regular daily practice of the voice. Nothing seems to have such a tendency to produce this disease as the occasional prolonged speaking, alternating with long intervals of rest, to which clergymen are more particularly subject. Anyone giving the subject a moment's consideration will readily understand this. If a man or any other animal be intended for any unusual muscular exertion, he is regularly exercised in it, day by day, and the labor is thus rendered easy with which otherwise it would be almost impossible to execute. But the generality of the clerical profession undergo a great amount of muscular exertion in the way of speaking only on one day of the week, whilst in the remaining 6 days they scarcely ever raise their voice to above the usual pitch. Were a smith or a carpenter thus occasionally to undergo the fatigue connected with the exercise of his trade, he would not only be quite unfitted for it, but he would lose the skill he had acquired. The example of the most celebrated orators the world has seen proves the advantages of regular and constant practice of speaking. And I would on this account most strongly recommend all persons subject to this complaint to read aloud once or twice a day, using the same pitch of voice as in the pulpit, and paying especial attention to the position of the chest and throat, and to clear and proper articulation of the words. Mr. Beecher is of the same opinion, for he remarks, "Newsboys show what out-of-door practice will do for a man's lungs. What would the pale and feeble-speaking minister do who can scarcely make his voice reach 200 auditors if he were set to cry newspapers? Those New York newsboys stand at the head of a street and send down their voices through it, as an athlete would roll a ball down an alley. We advise men training for speaking professions to peddle wares in the streets for a little time. Young ministers might go into partnership with newsboys a while, till they got their mouths open and their larynx nerved and toughened. Gentlemen, a needful rule is, always suit your voice to your matter. Do not be jubilant over a doleful subject, and on the other hand, do not drag heavily where the tones ought to trip along merrily, as though they were dancing to the tune of the angels in heaven. This rule I shall not enlarge upon, but rest assured it is of the utmost importance, and if obediently followed, will always secure attention, provided your matter is worth it. Suit your voice to your matter always, and above all, in everything, be natural. Away forever with slavish attention to rules and models. Do not imitate other people's voices, or if from an unconquerable propensity you must follow them, emulate every orator's excellencies, and the evil will be lessened. I am myself, by a kind of irresistible influence, drawn to be an imitator, so that a journey to Scotland or Wales will for a week or two materially affect my pronunciation and tone. Strive against it. I do, but there it is. And the only cure I know of is to let the mischief die a natural death. Gentlemen, I return to my rule. Use your own natural voices. Do not be monkeys, but men. Not parrots, but men of originality in all things. It is said that the most becoming way for a man to wear his beard is the way in which it grows. For both in color and form, it will suit his face. Your own modes of speech will be the most in harmony with your methods of thought and your own personality. The mimic is for the playhouse. The cultured man is in his sanctified personality is for the sanctuary. I would repeat this rule till I wearied you if I thought you would forget it by natural. If I thought you would forget it. Be natural. Be natural. Be natural evermore. An affectation of voice or an imitation of the manner of Dr. Silvertongue, the eminent divine, or even of the well-beloved tutor or president will inevitably ruin you. I charge you, throw away the servility of imitation and rise to the manliness of originality. We are bound to add, endeavor to educate your voice. Grudge no pains or labor in achieving this, for it has been well observed, however prodigious may the gifts of nature to her elect, they can only be developed and brought to their extreme perfection by labor and study. Think of Michelangelo, working for a week without taking off his clothes, and Handel hollowing out every key of his harpsichord like a spoon by incessant practice. Gentlemen, after this, never talk of difficulty or weariness. It is almost impossible to see the utility of Demosthenes' method of speaking with stones in his mouth, but anyone can perceive the usefulness of his pleading with the boisterous billows, that he might know how to command a hearing amidst the uproarious assemblies of his countrymen. And in his speaking as he ran up a hill that his lungs might gather force from laborious use is the reason as obvious as the self-denial is commendable. We are bound to use every possible means to perfect the voice by which we are to tell forth the glorious gospel of the blessed God. Take great care of the consonants. Enunciate every one of them clearly. They are the features and expressions of the words. Practice indefatigably till you give every one of the consonants its due. The vowels have a voice of their own, and therefore they can speak for themselves. In all other matters, exercise a rigid discipline until you have mastered your voice, and have it in hand like a well-trained steed. Gentlemen with narrow chests are advised to use the dumbbells every morning, or better still, those clubs which the college has provided for you. You need broad chests, and you must do your best to get them. Do not speak with your hands in your waistcoat pockets so as to constrict your lungs, but throw the shoulders back as public singers do. Do not lean over a desk while speaking, and never hold the head down on the breast while preaching. Upward rather than downward let the body bend. Off with all tight cravats and button-up waistcoats. Leave room for the full play of the bellows and the pipes. Observe the statutes of the Roman or Greek orators. Look at Raphael's picture of Paul, and without affectation fall naturally into the graceful and appropriate attitudes there depicted. For these are best for the voice. Get a friend to tell you your faults, or better still, welcome an enemy who will watch you keenly and sting you savagely. What a blessing such an irritating critic will be to a wise man. What an intolerable nuisance to a fool. Correct yourself diligently and frequently, or you will fall into errors unawares. False tones will grow, and slovenly habits will form insensibly. Therefore, criticize yourself with unceasing care. Think nothing little by which you may be even a little more useful. But gentlemen, never degenerate in this business into pulpit fops who think gesture and voice to be everything. I am sick at heart when I hear of men taking a whole week to get up a sermon, much of the getting up consisting in repeating their precious productions before a glass. Alas, for this age, if graceless hearts are to be forgiven for the sake of graceful manners. Give us all the vulgarities of the wildest backwoods itinerant rather than the perfumed prettiness of effeminate gentility. I would no more advise you to be fastidious with your voices than I would recommend you to imitate Rowland Hill's Mr. Taplash with his diamond ring, his richly scented pocket handkerchief, and his eyeglass. Exquisites are out of place in the pulpit. They should be set up in a tailor's window with a ticket. This style complete, including MSS, pound, 10 pounds, 1 OS. Perhaps here may be the place to observe that it were well if all parents were more attentive to the teeth of their children, since faulty teeth may cause serious damage to a speaker. There are men whose articulation is faulty, who should at once consult the dentist. I mean, of course, a thoroughly scientific and experienced one. For a few false teeth or some other simple arrangement would be permanent blessing to them. My own dentist very sensibly remarks in his circular, when a portion or the whole of the teeth are lost, a contraction of the muscles of the face and throat follows. The other organs of the voice, which have been accustomed to the teeth, are impaired and put out of their common play, producing a break, languor, or depression, as in a musical instrument which is deficient in a note. It is vain to expect perfect symphony and proportional and consistent accent on the key, tone, and pitch of the voice with deficiencies in its organs. And of course, the articulation becomes defective. Such defect adds much to the labor of speaking. To say the least, and in most cases lisping, a too hasty or sudden drop, or a faint delivery, is the result from more serious deficiencies. A mumbling and clattering is almost sure to follow. Where this is the mischief, and the cure is within reach, we are bound for our work's sake to avail ourselves of it. Teeth may seem unimportant, but be it remembered that nothing is little in so great a calling as ours. I shall in succeeding remarks mention even smaller matters, but it is with the deep impression that hints upon insignificant things may be of unknown value in saving you from serious neglects or gross errors. Lastly, I would say with regard to your throats, take care of them. Take care always to clear them well when you are about to speak, but do not be constantly clearing them while you are preaching. A very esteemed brother of my acquaintance always talks in this way. My dear friends, this is a most important subject which I now have to bring before you, and I have to call upon you to give me your most serious attention. Avoid this most zealously. Others, from want of clearing the throat, talk as if they were choked up and were just about to expectorate. It were far better to do so at once than to sicken the hearer by repeated unpleasant sounds. Snuffling and sniffling are excusable enough when a man has a cold, but they are extremely unpleasant, and when they become habitual, they ought to be indicted under the Nuisances Act. Pray excuse me, it may appear vulgar to mention such things, but your attention to the plain and free observations made in this lecture may save many remarks at your expense hereafter. When you have done preaching, take care of your throat by never wrapping it up tightly. From personal experience, I venture with some diffidences to give this piece of advice. If any of you possess delightfully warm woolen comforters with which there may be associated the most tender remembrances of mother or sister, treasure them. Treasure them in the bottom of your trunk. But do not expose them to any vulgar use by wrapping them round your necks. If any brother wants to die of influenza, let him wear a warm scarf around his neck, and then one of these nights he will forget it and catch such a cold as will last him the rest of his natural life. You seldom see a sailor wrap his neck up. No, he always keeps it bare and exposed. And as a turn-down collar, and if he has a tie at all, it is but a small one, loosely tied, so that the wind can blow all around his neck. In this philosophy I am a firm believer, having never deviated from it these 14 years, and having before that time been frequently troubled with colds, but very seldom since. If you feel that you want something else, why then grow your beards, a habit most natural, scriptural, manly, and beneficial. One of our brethren now present has for years found this of great service. He was compelled to leave England on account of the loss of his voice, but he has become as strong as Samson now that his locks are unshorn. If your throats become affected, consult a good physician, or if you cannot do this, give what attention you please to the following hint. Never purchase marshmallow rock, cough no more lozenges, pulmonic wafers, horehound, epiquenha, or any of the 10,000 emollient compounds. They may serve your turn for a time by removing present uneasiness, but they ruin the throat by their laxative qualities. If you wish to improve your throat, take a good share of pepper, good cayenne pepper, and other astringent substances, as much as your stomach can bear. Do not go beyond that, because you must recollect that you have to take care of your stomach as well as your throat. And if the digesting apparatus be out of order, nothing can be right. Common sense teaches you that astringents must be useful. Do you ever hear of a tanner making a piece of hide into leather by laying it to soak it in sugar? Neither would tolu, impaquana, or treacle serve his purpose, but the very reverse. If he wants to harden and strengthen the skin, he places it in a solution of oak bark, or some astringent substance which draws the material together and strengthens it. When I began to preach at Exeter Hall, my voice was weak for such a place, as weak as the usual run of voices, and it had frequently failed me altogether in street preaching. But in Exeter Hall, which is an unusually difficult place to preach in, from its excessive width in proportion to its length, I always had a little glass of chili vinegar and water just in front of me, a draught of which appeared to give a fresh force to the throat whenever it grew weary, and the voice appeared likely to break down. When my throat becomes a little relaxed, I usually ask the cook to prepare me a basin of beef tea, as strong with pepper as can be borne, and hitherto this has been a sovereign remedy. However, as I am not qualified to practice in medicine, you will probably pay no more attention to me in medical matters than to any other quack. My belief is that half the difficulties connected with the voice in our early days will vanish as we advance in years, and find in use a second nature. I would encourage the truly earnest to persevere. If they feel the word of the Lord like fire in their bones, even stammering may be overcome, and fear with all its paralyzing results may be banished. Take heart, young brother, persevere, and God and nature and practice will help you. And thus concludes the reading of Lecture 8 on the voice. I like it. I remember hearing that, listening to it in the audiobook. It's good stuff. It's again, weird stuff. I like how in the end he talks about you may not listen to me any more than you listen to some other quack, as I'm not a doctor. But I mean, it does make me wonder. Number one, I don't like hot things, so I don't like pepper. The thought of drinking anything with a cayenne pepper or anything, I'm like, I just don't like it at all. So just flavor, I don't want to drink it. I don't know if it might help or not. I don't know. But I am one, you can see I got my water cup and you've seen me drinking throughout the reading. It may be a weakness of mine, but I do sometimes even drink water from the pulpit. And I know a lot of men avoid that and do well all through, but I'm definitely a natural preacher and speaker, and obviously I'm not as good as others that I've regulated myself enough that I can keep always a throat that doesn't get dry from over breathing or speaking too strong, or maybe sometimes ventilation and things, I don't know. But I can go a long time without it, and by the grace of God, but when it's available, I like to use it. So I do. But yeah, it's important. Important, like he said, I think the key thing Spurgeon gets to us through this lecture, and that we need to hold to and remember, is that be who you are. Preach with the voice that you have to preach. And I love that he said something that was, man, it's so unheard of for most preachers. Unheard of for me too, but I preach more than a lot because I am a street preacher. I will tell you, I've said this and I've made some people mad saying this. And I think unrightly, they should not be mad. I mean, they'd probably squirm in their seat if they were listening to Spurgeon. Probably squirm when they read this from Spurgeon, whom many of them would say they love. Most of them would say they love. But they would totally disregard him when he says you should be out on the street preaching. But you should be. Whether it's the following out there to learn like the New York paper boys to get some voice strength. But my short exhortation is preachers should preach. And did a whole sermon on the preaching of preachers in and out of doors recently. But there's real practical and godly reason for it. Couple things, just real briefly. So Spurgeon's talking about the voice and preaching and touched on street preaching even in this lecture. It's important. It's important to be out there preaching. So I want to encourage you, Pastor, in two ways. One, if you've not got the book, I almost want to go over and get it, but I have to move my whole setup here and go grab it. But the book, The Forgotten Officer, by Pastor Joe Kohler. Notice Pastor Joe Kohler. It's him making the case from the Bible and doing an excellent job that the evangelist is a forgotten office today. That is not passed away to time. That the office of evangelist is an elder office. Therefore, we're not asking for a new office, just an officer. As the pastor, teacher is an elder office, so is the evangelist an active elder office in the church alongside the deacon office. There's those two offices being the office and the officers being deacons and elders. And in the elders, the subset of elders would be pastor, teachers, and evangelists. So I want to encourage pastors, especially I know you get busy, especially I know if you're bivocational too, that the prepping for your Sunday message, your Wednesday message, any other Sunday schools, Bible studies, or things you may be teaching, all that plus visiting families, counseling, and all that you do there, can I not encourage you to see, to investigate, pick up that book. I say this on here because I have sent it. I've mailed it to people who want it. I've still got several copies, and if you want it, I'll mail them out and give them to people as long as I've got copies to give. Serious pastors who are seriously considering looking into that. Because it will greatly benefit your church because it is the way the Bible has it set up. Be good for you to have an evangelist there to take on the brunt, the bulk of street preaching, though you should still preach out there. You should still go. You should join him when you can or are able, and you should want to. But be that as it may, if there are some few that cannot, and I would say that number is very few, very limited for very specific reasons, but for those who cannot or cannot often, it is so good and beneficial to the flock to have another elder officer, the evangelist, to help equip the saints and to lead them out into the streets, to take the flock out. He helps bring them back in, and maybe even those new ones who come, bring them back in to find pasture and be fed by the pasture indoors, and he leads them out to find pasture out of doors, going in and out, finding pasture as Jesus says we'll have. I want to encourage you in that. Select that office. Have that officer working with you, and I think that there can't be a better, more biblical way to plant a new church than to send the plurality of elders out, at least a pastor and an evangelist, to go out to do the work of church planting. Be that as it may, if you do not want to adopt that office, bringing in that officer into your church, then I would further encourage you, the truth remains, as Spurgeon would say. Preachers should preach. You should preach indoors and out of doors. Not only the most important thing, it glorifies God. Secondarily, the Bible says that it is the way in which people get saved. Faith comes from hearing, and how will they hear without a preacher? A lot of lost people out there. Everybody else in the Bible, they preached out of doors. It'd be good for you to go out of doors and preach. I mean, I'm not making some weird thing. Preachers should preach. Indoors, out of doors. Third, it'll be a blessing to you. You actually will enjoy it. If you're a preacher, you'll love preaching. The fourth thing I didn't get to in my sermon, but what Spurgeon brings up here in this lecture on the voice, it has practical benefit. It will strengthen your voice. You will be a better preacher by preaching. So think on that. A lot of people had troubles because they, one time a week often, pulpit, preach, and then the rest of the week they're not reading with oratory and strength, and they're not preaching. Preach, preacher, and you'll be a better preacher. Makes sense. Anyway, God bless you all. Hope you enjoyed this lecture, and sign up for Patreon if you want the extras. I'm going to go to get ready to record one of the bonus shows now. God bless all. Have a great day.